The storm rolled in without warning. Rain lashed against the windows in angry torrents, and the wind howled through the barren trees like a chorus of mournful voices. The power had flickered out an hour ago, leaving me to navigate my creaky old house by candlelight. I was trying to lose myself in a book when I first heard it. A faint knocking, barely audible over the storm. I froze, my heart quickening. The sound was subtle, irregular, like someone rapping on wood with trembling fingers. It was coming from next door. The house had been vacant for decades, its windows boarded up and its paint flaking in sad patches. Stories swirled around the neighborhood about why no one stayed there for long. Some whispered about the family who had lived there, how the mother lost her mind, claiming to hear voices, and the father who simply vanished one day. But it was the child everyone remembered, a boy no older than 6. He was said to have disappeared without a trace, leaving only a single scrawled word behind. Stay. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the tales as local folklore. Yet the knocking persisted, sharp and deliberate. My book forgotten, I stood, peering out my rain-streaked window. A single flicker of light danced behind the curtains of the abandoned house. I swallowed hard, my unease mounting. Was someone in there? Curiosity battled with a deep-seated instinct to stay put. But my feet moved of their own accord, carrying me to the front door. Grabbing a flashlight, I stepped out into the storm, the cold rain soaking through my clothes almost immediately. The house loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged against the night sky. I reached the sagging porch, the wood groaning beneath my weight. The knocking stopped as I approached, replaced by an unnatural silence. I hesitated, flashlight trembling in my grip. Then I saw it, something that hadn't been there before. A leather-bound journal rested on the doorstep, its cover dark and weathered. Despite the rain, the book was dry, as if untouched by the storm. My fingers brushed the worn leather, and an icy chill raced up my arm. As I picked it up, the wind howled, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. Welcome. The journal sat heavy in my lap as I lit another candle, its flickering light casting long shadows across my living room. The house was quiet now, the storm reduced to a gentle drizzle. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the cracked spine. Something about the book felt wrong, as if it carried a weight beyond its physical form. Taking a deep breath, I opened it. The pages were filled with a spidery scrawl, words bleeding into one another in an almost frantic haste. At first, the entries seemed mundane. Notes about renovations, complaints about the house's persistent drafts, and musings on the eerie quiet of the neighborhood. But as I read on, the tone shifted. The whispers began last night, faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but they've grown louder. I thought it was the wind, but no, they're inside the walls. My breath hitched. I flipped the pages faster, the entries growing more erratic. Whoever wrote them, likely the mother, if the pronouns were any indication, had become consumed by the whispers. She wrote about them calling her name, about shadows moving where none should. The final pages were almost indecipherable, the words scratched in jagged lines. They want me to remember. They want me to see what we've done. The house doesn't forget, and neither will they. The last page bore a single word, written in bold, deliberate strokes. Stay. A shiver crept up my spine. I glanced toward my window, half expecting to see the vacant house staring back at me. But the storm had cloaked the neighborhood in a thick mist, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. I should have stopped there. I should have put the journal away and let it fade into the realm of unsettling curiosities. But a magnetic pull drew me back to the neighbor's house the next morning. The storm had left the air crisp and damp, the world unusually quiet. I crossed the overgrown yard, stepping onto the porch where I'd found the journal. This time I pushed open the door. The house smelled of mildew and abandonment. Dust motes danced in the beams of light spilling through the boarded windows. My flashlight swept across the room, illuminating faded wallpaper and warped floorboards. The whispers from the journal echoed in my mind, urging me to dig deeper. I didn't have to look far. In the dining room, a section of the wall had peeled away, revealing a cavity behind the plaster. Something poked out, a corner of yellowed paper. I reached in, pulling free a bundle of letters bound with brittle twine. The handwriting matched the journal, though the tone was more measured. They were addressed to someone named Henry, the husband, I assumed. The letters described a growing tension in the house, of a presence felt but never seen. One passage struck me. It knows we lied. I hear it at night, clawing at the truth, pulling at the edges of our story. We buried the past, but the house, it remembers. I ran my fingers over the brittle paper, the words sinking into me like stones. A creak broke the silence, and I whipped around, my flashlight trembling. There was no one there, but from somewhere deeper in the house I could swear I heard it. The faint, unmistakable sound of whispering. The whispers followed me home. Even as I locked the front door and set the bundle of letters on my table, the sensation lingered. A faint, persistent hum just at the edge of hearing. It wasn't audible in the usual sense, but felt more like the murmur of thoughts that weren't entirely my own. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as the residue of a morning spent in a decaying house steeped in legend. But when I sat down to read the letters, the whispers grew louder. The first few were banal enough, recounting repairs to the house or mundane details of daily life. Yet as I delved deeper, the tone shifted. A thread of unease wove through the words, growing stronger with each passing letter. Henry, I can't sleep anymore. It's not just the creaks or drafts, it's them. The whispers are louder now, and they speak in voices I almost recognize. They're inside the walls, inside my mind. You must hear them too. My skin prickled as I read on. The writer, clearly the mother, described her growing paranoia. She wrote of shadows moving in daylight and of hearing a child's laughter when she was alone in the house. I've tried to talk to him, but he doesn't respond. He only stares at the attic door, as if waiting for something. I asked what he sees, but he just pointed and said, "It's watching." The last letter ended abruptly. They won't let me forget. They say we owe them something. Henry, if you're reading this, please, don't go into the attic. Whatever you do, don't... The page tore off there, the final words lost. I dropped the letter, my breath shallow. The whispers returned, stronger this time, carrying an urgency that made my chest tighten. I tried to shake it off, blaming an overactive imagination. But when I glanced toward the window, the sight stopped me cold. The neighbor's house, its boarded windows and sagging roof, seemed different. The air around it shimmered faintly, like heat rising off asphalt. And there, just visible through the broken slats of a window, I thought I saw movement. A figure, small, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. The letters lay on the table, their presence a challenge I couldn't ignore. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and jacket and stepped back out into the damp gray afternoon. I was going back in. The house greeted me with an oppressive silence, broken only by the soft crunch of my footsteps. I moved quickly, avoiding the temptation to linger in the musty rooms. My goal was clear, the attic. The staircase groaned beneath my weight as I climbed, the shadows around me lengthening unnaturally. The attic door loomed at the end of the hall, slightly ajar as if inviting me in. My heart thudded in my chest as I pushed it open. The attic was suffocatingly still. Dust hung in the air, stirred by my arrival, and the weak light from my flashlight barely illuminated the space. Boxes and forgotten furniture crowded the corners, their shapes distorted in the dimness. And then I saw it. A small, wooden trunk sat in the center of the room, its lid slightly askew. My flashlight trembled as I approached, each step feeling like a step deeper into something I didn't fully understand. The air grew colder, and the whispers swirled around me, fragmented words overlapping into an unintelligible hum. I knelt before the trunk, lifting the lid slowly. Inside were objects that belonged to a child, a pair of scuffed shoes, a toy train, and a faded photograph of a boy with wide, haunting eyes. Beneath these lay a single folded piece of paper. The handwriting was familiar, matching the letters I'd read earlier. "To whomever finds this," it began, "we made a mistake. We thought we could ignore the truth, that we could bury what we'd done. But this house doesn't forget, and neither do they. They want what was taken from them. If you're here, you've already heard them. Please, leave while you still can." My pulse quickened as the whispers grew deafening, forming a single chilling word. "Stay." The door behind me slammed shut. I spun around, my flashlight beam slicing through the dark, but the attic was empty. The door remained shut, the room unnaturally still, save for the oppressive whispers that wrapped around me. "Who's there?" My voice cracked, the sound swallowed by the heavy silence. The whispers intensified, a rising crescendo of voices overlapping, words spilling over each other in frantic bursts. Yet one voice stood out, a soft, childlike murmur that seemed to echo from the corners of the room. I turned the flashlight toward the sound, the beam landing on a small shape in the corner. It was the toy train from the trunk, its faded paint glinting faintly. It moved. Not much, just a subtle jerk forward, as though nudged by unseen hands. My blood ran cold as the whispers coalesced into a single, clear phrase. "Remember us." The photograph from the trunk fluttered to the floor, landing face up. The boy's wide, hollow eyes seemed to lock onto mine, pleading. "Who are you?" I whispered, kneeling to pick up the photo. As I touched it, the room changed. The dim, dusty attic dissolved into a vivid memory, like a film projected across my mind. I saw the boy, his face lit with joy as he played by a sunlit window. I saw the mother, her movements hurried, her eyes darting to the shadows as if she felt them closing in. And then I saw the father, standing by the attic door, his expression grim as he carried a bundle wrapped tightly in cloth. The memory faded as quickly as it had come, leaving me gasping in the dark. The whispers returned, their tone heavier now, filled with sorrow. They weren't angry. They were grieving. The truth began to unravel, a chilling realization that sent me stumbling back toward the trunk. Whatever had happened in this house, it was more than a family's tragedy. It was an injustice, a secret buried so deeply it had scarred the very walls. The whispers softened, forming a single plea. "Help us." The attic had become a living thing. The air hummed with energy, the walls seemed to breathe, and the whispers ebbed and flowed like a tide. They filled the space, not as a threat, but as a relentless plea. The boy's hollow eyes from the photograph haunted me, his gaze a silent indictment. I had seen the truth, or at least a fragment of it. Something had been taken, something that left a wound festering in this house for decades. But what? "Help us," the voices urged again, softer now, almost desperate. The photograph slipped from my fingers, landing face down on the wooden floor. My flashlight's beam flickered, casting the room into intermittent darkness. A chill wrapped around me, heavier than the cold of the attic itself, as though unseen hands were guiding me. The trunk. My flashlight steadied as I knelt once more. Beneath the toys and memories, The bottom of the trunk was lined with a loose piece of wood. It wobbled under my touch. My breath quickened as I pried it up, revealing a hollow space. Inside was a journal, smaller than the first, its leather cover cracked with age. I opened it, the pages brittle and yellowed, the ink smudged but legible. December 23rd. We didn't know what else to do. He wouldn't stop crying, and the shadows kept coming closer. They want him, but I can't. I won't give him up. Henry says it's the only way, but he doesn't understand. This house, it doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. The entries grew more erratic. The mother wrote of her son hearing voices, of the father insisting they leave him in the attic to appease whatever haunted the house. She refused, but it was clear her resolve faltered as the days wore on. December 24th. I hear them louder now. They call his name. They call mine. Henry is gone, left us alone. I don't know if he ran or if they took him. They want my boy. They say it's the only way to quiet the walls. The final page was smudged with what looked like water stains, the words frantic and incomplete. I've locked the door, but they'll find him. They always find them. Oh, God, I'm sorry. The page ended there, a jagged tear marking its abrupt conclusion. I sat back, the journal slipping from my hands. The whispers swirled around me again, more insistent this time. Remember us. Restore what was taken. Taken. The word echoed in my mind as the pieces of the story fell into place. The boy had been left to the house, not killed, but abandoned, a living sacrifice to appease the thing lurking in the shadows. The whispers weren't just memories. They were the echoes of a broken promise, the remnants of a life stolen too soon. I can't bring him back, I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't know how. The whispers faded, replaced by a heavy silence. Then, slowly, a single phrase emerged, whispered so faintly I barely caught it. Free us. The attic door creaked open behind me, its sound a hollow groan. A cold breeze swept through, carrying with it a faint glow from somewhere below. I followed the light. The house led me to the dining room, the space colder than before. The walls shimmered faintly, like the edge of a mirage, as if the house itself was caught between worlds. In the center of the room, the light pooled on the floor, illuminating a spot where the boards looked newer than the rest. My pulse quickened as I knelt, my fingers brushing over the seams of the wood. This was it, the secret buried by the family, the truth the house refused to let go. I pressed against the boards, and they gave way, revealing a shallow compartment beneath. Inside was a bundle of fabric, old and frayed, tied with twine. I hesitated before unwrapping it. The whispers returned, but softer now, almost hopeful. The bundle contained a child's blanket, threadbare and stained with time. Beneath it lay a small toy, a wooden soldier, its paint chipped but recognizable. A pang of sorrow pierced my chest as I realized what I was holding. The last remnants of the boy, the things he clung to as he waited for parents who never returned. The house trembled faintly, as though exhaling after years of holding its breath. I remember you, I whispered. I see you. The light grew brighter, enveloping the room in a soft, golden glow. The whispers quieted, replaced by a profound stillness that carried an unexpected peace. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The house fell silent. When I stepped outside, the air was lighter. The oppressive weight of the house lifted. The boarded windows and sagging roof were unchanged, yet the house no longer felt like a prison. I glanced back, half expecting to see a shadow in the window. But there was nothing, only stillness. The whispers were gone, their story finally told, their plea finally heard. And though the house remained, I knew it no longer held the burden of a family's tragedy. As I walked away, the wind carried a single faint whisper. "Thank you." I turned back, but the house stood quiet and still, the past finally at rest.